going to pull my ear off one of these days. I have the pleasure and honor of reading for our Story for All Ages a poem that was written by Catherine, which is an amazing poem, and I think you will really, really like it. One year, I escaped winter on a sandy white beach, the ocean's vast power within my reach. I watched the stars at night and felt the waves rush at my feet. I savored the sun, examining seashells one by one. Watching children play one day, I looked at their parents in a new way. One little girl building a sandcastle kept watching it wash away with the tide. When she cried, her father said, "It's not worth the hassle," and suggested they go for a swim. She stomped on the castle and followed him. Another child trying to build a sandcastle was feeling frustrated. His parents called him over and built one for him. When they were finished, it looked like something that would surely last. But by then, the boy had lost interest. Another boy spent hours on his sandcastle. He moved it closer to land, then closer to the water to find the right consistency. His mother was busy preparing a picnic lunch and caring for her baby. Yet she watched the boy when he didn't know it. At one point, he threw fistfuls of sand, and later he ran and kicked it down, but he persisted. Had I been sitting behind his mother, I may have thought her unkind or uncaring, but I could see her face. Her eyes revealed the truth. She vacillated from looking hopeful to looking frustrated. When he kicked his creation, she had a look so painful, it became a painful situation. Yet she watched him constantly out of the corner of her eye. She never offered to help, but at lunchtime, she offered words of encouragement, which I'm not sure he could even hear at that point, but he persisted. By the end of that afternoon, that child had created a masterpiece in the sandcastle world. His mother quietly smiled, and the boy was overcome with joy, handing the baby a soft toy. The mother walked over and took his picture beside the sandcastle. Her eyes were full from that look of pride. Later, when the sun began its descent in the sky, and all the children had that tired look in their eye, the families filtered away one by one. It was obvious they'd all had fun. Watching them go, I had a thought as clear as the sky above me. Each family was different. Each handled their children and their frustrations differently. To judge or criticize parenting seemed quite unnecessary, especially because the way our lives flow, these children will be parents themselves before you know. One child ended up swimming most of the day, while another explored the beach every which way, while still another persisted and finished his original task. By the time those little eyes were fast asleep, the tide had washed away any signs of their footprints, their joys, or their struggles. The beach was like a clean slate, ready for a new day, waiting for more children who'd be coming to play. Not wanting to give up the day, I stayed a long time until the stars matched the sparkle of the seashells on the beach. Finally, I stretched and walked away, thankful for the lesson that I had observed that day.
carry yours.
Thank you, Catherine, and thank you, Cal. This is a meditation on goodness. This will be the reading for reflective silence, followed by a moment of silence, and then joining together as we remain seated to sing Spirit of Life. Goodness is a means, not an end. Look within. Who can stop the hunger for more than we deserve? Who can prevent a jealous thought from urging us to protect our hearts? Who can ward off all the uncertainties that disturb the mind before we decide to act? Were perfection required to be good, all human existence would be a living hell. Believe otherwise. Embodying love is the endless means to be good. In each moment, love stands at our side, ready to be chosen. Choose wisely. It's my pleasure to say a few words of introduction before turning the program over to Catherine. Catherine Johnson has been an attendee or member of our fellowship for a number of years. She came at one point when her children were younger and then got busy and then came back. I've learned a couple of new things about Catherine just this morning, and that is she's a talented poet, and she has a whole book of poems in a collection. And those are things I didn't know about her. I imagine when she gives us this talk, we'll learn even more. I know that the last year or two has been challenging for Catherine, not only with the pandemic, but with some personal health issues. And she's fresh out of 2 cataract surgeries. And just keeping on. So we appreciate her your unique and creative contribution this morning, and we look forward to learning what she has to say. So please help me welcome Catherine.
That's why the print is so big. The definition of emotional intelligence, according to the Oxford Languages, is the capacity to be aware of, control, and express one's emotions, and to handle interpersonal relationships judiciously and empathetically. Emotional IQ is the key to both personal and professional success. The term emotional intelligence was created by two researchers, Peter Salvoy and John Mayer, in their article Emotional Intelligence in the journal Imagination, Cognition, and Personality in 1990. It was later made popular by Dan Goleman in his 1995 book. Dan Goleman is an internationally known psychologist who lectures frequently to professional groups, business audiences, and on college campuses. As a science journalist, Goleman reported on the brain and behavioral science for the New York Times for many years. The Harvard Business Review called emotional intelligence, which discounts IQ as the sole measure of one's abilities, a revolutionary, paradigm-shattering idea. And they chose his article, What Makes a Leader, as one of the 10 must-read articles from its pages. It's a scientific fact that emotions precede thought. When emotions run high, they change the way our brains function, diminishing our cognitive abilities, decision-making powers, and even interpersonal skills. Understanding and managing our emotions and understanding the emotions of others helps us to be more successful in both our professional and personal lives. At a personal level, emotional intelligence helps us have uncomfortable conversations without hurting feelings, manage our emotions when stressed or feeling overwhelmed, and improve relationships with the people we care about. At work, it can help us to resolve conflicts, coach and motivate others, create a culture of collaboration, and build psychological safety within teams. The information on emotional IQ is interesting, educational, and has given me some insight into myself and the relationships I have in my life. However, the reason I am truly interested in this topic is because of Trevin. He is a young man I worked with from the time he was 6 or 7 years old until he turned 21. Trevin has cerebral palsy and significant developmental delays. He is awkward, impulsive, mischievous, happy, and fun-loving. For 20 years, I worked with a lot of children with a variety of severe to minor disabilities through a community-based program. We created a home for the kids to come to after school and on weekends, and to have sleepovers with their peers, which is not something they had been able to do. We took the kids to movies, stores, restaurants, ice skating, bowling, gymnastics, which was actually a disaster, swimming, and whatever else we could think of to get them out into the community. We hung out at Cares, our home away from home, when they or I needed the quiet time. We also had some hard times in our work. I went to more than one funeral for very young children who didn't have a chance in this life. We also dealt with tough emotional hardships from the parents of these kids, who sometimes were in denial, at times in tears, and most of all, trying to figure out how to give their child a sense of purpose and quality of life. As difficult as this could be, I was passionate about enriching their lives and advocating for them. A few examples of how I viewed the kids, especially Trevin, reinforced my personal understanding of emotional intelligence. When our German Shepherd died, I was, of course, feeling down about that. Trevin and I pulled up to my house and he started saying, "Puppy, puppy," one of his few words, and he started to cry. I'm not sure if he could feel my sadness or he just couldn't understand why she wasn't coming out to greet him. When Trevin cried, it was heartfelt. Once when I took Trevin to a movie, which had a sad ending, he started to cry. It was somewhat surprising that he understood the entire message and sorrow of that movie. His cry turned to sobs. His sobs turned into bent over sobbing devastation. My task was now to get him from the seats in the theater to my car. By this time, he was a tall, awkward young man and not always easy to get from one place to another. As I'm encouraging him to walk and almost dragging him to my car, I got the giggles over the situation. I am quite certain that I look like the worst caregiver on the face of the earth. Another part of Trevin's emotional intelligence was that he could tell when he could sense the moment I was starting to feel frustrated. He would get this grin on his face and turn it into a game. The more frustrated I became, the more he enjoyed pushing my buttons. I would either have to walk away for a few minutes or try to turn my frustration into patience. He tuned into that calmness that changed my mood, and then he would cooperate. He also knew when my coworker, Becky, and I were upbeat and happy, and he would join in with enthusiasm and laughter. He could be the brightest light in the room, regardless of his ability to fully understand or communicate with us. Every summer, Becky and I took Trevin and a young man with significant autism to camp for a week. These two ignored and irritated each other most of the time, but at camp they were buddies. Trevin pretty much knew to stay out of his way because his peer was easily overstimulated and extremely sensitive to his environment. For some reason, camp was different for both of them. Trevin sensed that. The four of us spent 5 or 6 nights in a cabin every summer. The young man with autism somehow seemed calmer and happy to be there. I don't know if it was being in nature, being away from school and our respite home, or just the mountain air, but he was happy. Trevin knew he could feel that something was different about his friend, and they had fun. We would put a strip of blue tape down on the floor in the center of the cabin, giving them each a separate space to claim. Of course, Trevin would push the limits and occasionally cross the line, but it wasn't as severe a reaction as compared to other times we were together at CARES. At night, they were in lower bunk beds, which were actually one long bed divided by a frame, which put them right next to each other. Trevin would tease his friend, reach over and pull on his pillow or just bug him, and they would both laugh and giggle. It was pretty amazing considering their relationship otherwise and the polar opposites that they are. Many of the kids that Jolene, Becky, and I worked with did not have many words to communicate. It was actually amazing how they could convey their needs, their mood, and their emotions. We experienced a whole gamut of emotions with these kids, and sometimes to an elevated and extreme level. One of our young ladies seemed to be tuned into emotions more than cognitive functioning. She would often say to me, "Catherine, I love you." Then she would take a breath, look at me and say, "What's your name?" I will never know for sure, but it felt like she truly cared for me and was able to express that emotion, but 2 seconds later wasn't sure who I was. Of course, it could have been her sense of humor because she always laughed after she said it. Becky and I still laugh when we think of her. I will always be grateful for the years I spent with these children. It's not so much because of what I taught them, but what they taught me. The quality of a person's life is not necessarily what they accomplish or what is defined as normal. It is how they choose to live. I'm not discounting their struggles or society's unfeeling acceptance of them, but the children we worked with had a way of bringing joy to others. An image of the brain shows the cerebral cortex and the emotional area of the brain below it. The cerebral cortex is the seat of our intellectual brain, while our emotional brain is below, and the damage to the cortex in intellectual disorders does not necessarily mean damage to the emotional part of the brain. The bell-shaped curve of the brain shows where someone lies on the curve if they have very limited language, and how you would not expect the degree of emotional intelligence demonstrated if the damage came from the same place in the brain. This makes sense when thinking of someone like Trevin. In lay terms, the emotional part of the brain is more protected and therefore can be intact regardless of the damage to other parts of the brain. So where does that leave us in a discussion of emotional intelligence? For me personally, I feel I have a lot of traits of someone who is emotionally intelligent, like empathy, and I try to handle relationships judiciously and empathetically, but I am not in control of my emotions by any means. I have a temper and I overreact at times, especially when I have a strong opinion about something. I am way too sensitive when those I love have conflicts. Sometimes my empathy is so keen that it's not good. I feel what others feel, almost to the detriment of both of us. You can't pick someone up if you fall in the trenches with them. I can't mend or guide the relationship of others. That's on them and out of my control. But that empathy makes me want to try. In order to be strong enough to advocate for others and assure them I know how they feel, I have to realize that I can't change anything in their lives. I think a person who is emotionally intelligent would know that all we can do is offer love and support. Recently, I went to a speech therapist for some cognitive retraining because I have memory issues due to grand mal seizures. It was really interesting because after some evaluation, she said that my memory problems are somewhat opposite of an individual with dementia. For me, I have lost memories of the past, but function fairly well day to day. A person with dementia can often remember their childhood and past experiences, but not the here and now. Even more enlightening was when she asked me to recall 3 or 4 past events or trips. She pointed out that I could not recall a lot of the details, but I held on to the emotions around that visit. The statements that emotion precede thought is very interesting and easy to see why we are overwhelmed in stressful times. I guess the key is to allow yourself to process your emotions and take a moment before you react. I do not mean to suggest hiding your emotions, but tuning into them in a healthier way. Easier said than done, but we can try. Goldman writes, self-absorption in all of its forms kills empathy, let alone compassion. When we focus on ourselves, our world contracts as our problems and preoccupations loom large. But when we focus on others, our world expands. Our own problems drift to the periphery of the mind and so seem smaller. And we increase our capacity for connection or compassion. Leadership is not domination, but the art of persuading people to work toward a common goal. Currently, I am working in an elementary school with children who are intelligent sponges, taking in knowledge and experiences that will stay with them for a lifetime. Of course, each individual child has their own capacity and style of learning, and they each have different experiences interacting with peers and in their home life. I believe educators are becoming more in tune with a child's social and emotional well-being and recognize the strengths and concerns for each student. We reward acts of kindness and discourage bullying. We are very aware of students who may come to school hungry or distracted from what is happening in their home life. Emotional IQ will never be graded in the same way that we grade schoolwork. However, becoming aware of it and respecting each child's unique circumstances and their emotional needs and strengths will enrich their lives to the same degree as their traditional education. The discovery and understanding of emotional intelligence is key to educating, accepting, and valuing others. Realizing that each individual person has the capacity for academic intelligence and or emotional intelligence allow us to the respect for everyone. To quote Theodore Roosevelt, "No one cares how much you know until they know how much you care." Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. Now we'll join together in singing hymn number 131, Love Will Guide Us.
Yes. What is that?
Oh.
Thanks. Let this be an offering to sustain and strengthen this place, which is so sacred to many of us, a community of memory and hope, for we are keepers of the dream.